Every morning at 6:15, a retired postal worker in Tulsa, Oklahoma, opened the same cabinet, reached for the same can, and made the same meal he had eaten for 1,400 straight days. It took him 4 minutes. He spent $1.10. His neighbor, a woman who had not cooked a full dinner since her husband died in 2003, kept a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter on the counter like medicine. Number 12 on this list was her only dinner for 3 years. Number 22 costs 63 cents. Number 7 was what a retired nurse in Memphis made when her arthritis was so bad she could not grip a pot handle. These are survival meals. 5 minutes or less, one plate, one person, almost no money. Hit that subscribe button. Here are the 25 forgotten poor man 5-minute meals for seniors living alone. Number 25. Sardines on toast. In 1943, The Joy of Cooking printed a recipe for sardine toast that cost less than a dime. 80 years later, the meal still works the same way. You opened a tin, laid the fish across a piece of toast, and ate it over the sink or at the table. That was the whole production. A tin of sardines cost 89 cents at most grocery stores in 2024. One tin had 23 grams of protein and more calcium than a glass of milk because of the soft bones packed inside. Seniors who ate sardines regularly were getting omega-3 fatty acids that most Americans pay $30 a month for in supplement form. Fishermen's wives in Gloucester, Massachusetts ate sardine toast for lunch every day through the 1950s and 1960s. They did not call it a health food. They called it Tuesday. For a senior with shaking hands, there was no knife work, no cooking, no heat required. You pulled the tab, you spread the fish, you ate. Done. Number 24, peanut butter and banana sandwich. George Washington Carver spent decades proving that the peanut could feed a nation. He was right. A jar of peanut butter cost $2.50 in 2024 and lasted a single person 2 weeks. A bunch of bananas cost 65 cents. 2 slices of bread, a smear of peanut butter, half a banana sliced on top. That was a meal with 15 grams of protein, potassium, and enough calories to carry a person through an entire evening. Senior centers across the rural South served this as an afternoon meal because it required no refrigeration, no preparation space, and no cleanup beyond a butter knife and a plate. Harold Meeks, a retired carpenter in Paducah, Kentucky, ate one every night at 5:30 for the last 4 years of his life. His daughter found the routine maddening. His doctor found his potassium levels perfect. The USDA reported in 2023 that peanut butter was the single most consumed protein source among Americans over the age of 75 who lived alone. Not chicken, not eggs. Peanut butter. The reason was not taste. Number 23, cottage cheese and canned peaches. This was the meal that women of a certain generation called a salad. It was not a salad. It was a scoop of cottage cheese dropped onto a plate beside a mound of canned peach halves drained from a 79-cent can. That was the entire preparation. No heat, no stirring, no standing. A half cup of cottage cheese delivered 14 grams of protein and was soft enough for seniors with dental problems to eat without struggle. The peaches added sweetness and vitamin C. Hospital cafeterias served this exact combination on trays to patients recovering from surgery in the 1960s and 1970s because it required no chewing and no digestion effort. For a senior living alone, it was the meal you made when you did not feel like eating, but knew you had to. It asked nothing of you. It just sat there on the plate, waiting. Weight Watchers put cottage cheese and fruit on its approved list in 1963, and an entire generation of American women never stopped eating it. Number 22, fried egg sandwich. 2 eggs, 2 slices of bread, a pat of butter. Total cost in 2024, 63 cents. You melted the butter in a skillet, cracked the eggs, waited 3 minutes, put them between the bread, and sat down. That was it. The Depression generation ate fried egg sandwiches the way modern Americans eat fast food, quickly, cheaply, without thinking. But the nutritional math was different. 2 eggs had 12 grams of protein, B12, and choline, a nutrient that most seniors were deficient in and that doctors now link to memory and brain function. Diners across America sold fried egg sandwiches for 35 cents in the 1970s. By the 1990s, they had mostly disappeared from menus. But in kitchens where money was tight and time was short, the fried egg sandwich never went anywhere. Edna Kowalski, a retired seamstress in Toledo, Ohio, made one every morning and every evening for 19 years. She called it her bookend meal. The day started and ended the same way. That rhythm mattered to her more than the food itself. Number 21. Buttered noodles with salt and pepper. A box of store-brand egg noodles cost 89 cents and contained 8 servings. You boiled a handful, drained them, added a tablespoon of butter, salt, and black pepper. 3 minutes of cooking. 0 minutes of thought. This was the meal that mothers made for sick children in the 1950s, and that widowers made for themselves in the 1990s. The simplicity was not a compromise. It was the entire point. For a senior whose appetite had faded, plain buttered noodles went down easy and stayed down. No strong flavors to reject, no textures to fight. Nursing home cooks knew this. When a resident refused everything else on the tray, they brought buttered noodles. It worked almost every time. The meal was so plain it was invisible. Nobody photographed it. Nobody wrote about it. But it kept people eating when nothing else could. A geriatric nutritionist at Johns Hopkins published a paper in 2018 noting that simple carbohydrate meals like buttered noodles played a critical role in preventing dangerous weight loss among elderly patients living independently. Number 20. Canned chili over crackers. A can of Hormel chili cost $1.79. A sleeve of saltine crackers cost $1.29 and lasted a month. You opened the can, heated it in a bowl in the microwave for 90 seconds, and crumbled crackers on top. That was dinner. The chili had 15 grams of protein per can. The crackers gave it crunch and made the portion feel bigger than it was. Truck stops across Oklahoma and Texas sold this combination for $2.99 in the 1980s. Retired truckers who missed the road kept eating it at home because the taste was the same and the price was right. For a senior with limited mobility, the microwave was the only tool required. No stove, no flame, no standing. You could make this sitting in a kitchen chair. Hormel introduced its canned chili in 1935, marketing it as a convenience food for busy families. By the 1970s, the company was selling 50 million cans a year. Number 19. Tuna salad on bread. One can of chunk-light tuna cost $1.09 in 2024. A spoonful of mayonnaise, a pinch of salt, a squeeze of lemon if you had it, mash it with a fork, spread it on bread. 2 minutes. Church food pantries across the Midwest packed tuna, mayonnaise packets, and bread together in bags because they knew this was the meal most seniors would actually make, not the dried pasta. Not the canned vegetables that required a pot and a stove and energy that some people did not have. The tuna sandwich. Dorothy Hale, a 74-year-old widow in Wichita, Kansas, told a food bank volunteer in 2019 that she ate tuna on bread 5 nights a week. The volunteer asked if she wanted something different. Dorothy said no. She said the tuna was easy and the bread was soft, and she could eat it watching the evening news without getting up. That was enough. The American canned tuna industry peaked in 1989 when the average American ate 3.5 pounds of canned tuna per year. Number 18. Toast with canned baked beans. In Britain, beans on toast is a national institution. In America, it was the meal nobody admitted to eating. A can of baked beans cost $1.19. 2 slices of toast cost pennies. You heated the beans, poured them over the toast, and ate. The beans had fiber, protein, and enough substance to count as a full dinner. British pensioners ate this 3 or 4 times a week without a trace of shame. American seniors ate it just as often, but called it a snack because admitting that beans on toast was dinner felt like admitting something larger. That is the cruelty of food poverty in America. The meals that work the best carry the most embarrassment. Nobody should feel ashamed of feeding themselves for $1.30. But millions of people did. This was the meal that kept people alive while making them feel invisible. For a senior eating alone, the silence at the table was louder than the meal. That invisibility had weight. Number 17. Cheese quesadilla. 1 flour tortilla, a handful of shredded cheese, a dry skillet. Fold the tortilla in half, drop it in the pan, flip it once. 2 minutes. The cheese melted and held the tortilla together, and the edges crisped in the dry heat. Total cost, about 40 cents. Mexican-American families in South Texas made this for children as an afternoon snack. Seniors adopted it as a full meal because it was fast, required one hand, and could be eaten without a fork. A retired school bus driver in San Antonio named Ruben Garza told his daughter he ate quesadillas 4 nights a week. She asked what he ate the other 3 nights. He said crackers. The flour tortilla was introduced to American grocery stores on a national scale in the early 1980s. Before that, you had to live near a Mexican bakery or make your own. By 2024, flour tortillas outsold hamburger buns in the United States. The shift was not cultural appreciation, it was economics. A package of 10 tortillas cost $2.49. A package of 8 hamburger buns cost $3.29. Number 16. Oatmeal with brown sugar. A canister of old-fashioned oats cost $3.49 in 2024 and contained 30 servings. That was 12 cents a bowl. You measured half a cup of oats, added water, microwaved it for 90 seconds, and stirred in a spoonful of brown sugar. 5 grams of protein. 4 grams of fiber. A warm bowl that felt like morning even when you ate it at 7 in the evening. The Quaker Oats Company began marketing oatmeal as a health food in the 1980s, but Depression-era families had been eating it for survival long before anyone cared about cholesterol. For a senior living alone, oatmeal served a double purpose. It was breakfast when you ate it in the morning, and it was comfort when you ate it at night. The warmth of the bowl in your hands on a cold evening in February mattered as much as the nutrition inside it. Meals on Wheels programs across the country reported that oatmeal was the #1 food item that recipients already had in their homes before the first delivery arrived. It preceded the help. Number 15. Tomato soup with crackers. A can of Campbell's condensed tomato soup cost $1.29 and had been sitting in American pantries since 1897. You added water or milk, heated it on the stove or in the microwave, and crumbled saltines into it until the surface disappeared under a layer of soggy crackers. That was the ritual. Andy Warhol made the can famous in 1962, but the soup was already famous in every kitchen where money was tight and time was shorter. Senior centers served tomato soup with grilled cheese as their most popular lunch combination for decades. For a person eating alone, the soup was warm and familiar, and the crackers gave you something to do with your hands. Eating slowly, breaking each cracker into pieces, watching them sink, it was almost a meditation. Campbell's sold more than 2.5 billion cans of soup per year in the United States during the 2010s. Internal marketing research leaked in 2019 showed that adults over 65 accounted for 38% of all condensed soup purchases, the largest single demographic. The company knew this. Number 14. Bologna and cheese sandwich. 2 slices of white bread, a slice of bologna, a slice of American cheese, a smear of mustard. That was the lunch that built working-class America and then retired with it. Oscar Mayer bologna cost $2.49 a package in 2024 and contained enough slices for 8 sandwiches. That was 31 cents per meal before the bread and cheese. Factory workers in Detroit and Cleveland and Gary ate this every day for 30 years, then kept eating it in retirement because the taste was wired into them. It was not nostalgia, it was neurological. The flavor of cold bologna on soft bread with yellow mustard triggered something that no restaurant meal could replicate. For a senior living alone, this sandwich was less than 5 minutes from start to finish, required no heat, no cleanup beyond a plate, and tasted exactly the same every single time. That predictability was not boring. It was safe. In a world where everything else was changing and falling away, the bologna sandwich stayed exactly where you left it. The economics of meals like this one tell a story that the food industry would rather you did not hear. A package of bologna, a loaf of bread, and a block of cheese cost under $7 together and fed a person for a week. A single frozen dinner from the same grocery store cost $4 and lasted one night. The math was not complicated, but the frozen dinner had a commercial and a colorful box and a place in the freezer section at eye level. The bologna was on the bottom shelf. The beans were in the back aisle. The oats were wherever the store decided to hide them. These meals survived not because of marketing, but in spite of it. The cheapest, most nutritious foods in America are the ones with the smallest advertising budgets and the lowest profit margins. That is not an accident. It is a business model that depends on seniors not knowing what a can of beans and a slice of bread can actually do. Number 13, scrambled eggs and toast. Clara Canucciari was 93 years old when her grandson filmed her making Depression-era recipes in her kitchen. One of the first things she made was scrambled eggs. She cracked 2 eggs into a bowl, stirred them with a fork, poured them into a buttered pan, and pushed them around for 90 seconds. 2 slices of toast on the side. That was dinner. During the Depression, her family ate scrambled eggs 3 or 4 times a week because a dozen eggs cost 18 cents in 1933, and each egg was a self-contained meal. In 2024, a dozen eggs cost around $3.50 at most grocery stores, which still made each egg less than 30 cents. For a senior with limited grip strength, cracking eggs was sometimes the hardest part. Some kept a small bowl on the counter to crack them against the edge. Some bought liquid eggs in cartons. The adaptation was quiet, practical, and invisible, like most things seniors did to keep themselves fed. The videos Clara made with her grandson gained millions of views on YouTube. Number 12, ramen noodles with an egg. A single packet of ramen cost 25 cents in 2024. That made it the cheapest meal in America per serving. You boiled water, dropped in the noodles, stirred in the seasoning packet, and cracked an egg into the pot in the last 30 seconds. The egg poached gently in the hot broth, the yolk still soft. 4 minutes total. A retired postal worker's wife in Cleveland, Ohio, a woman named Vivian Cross, ate ramen with an egg every night for 2 years after her husband passed. She told her daughter it was because she was not hungry enough for a real meal. But the truth was simpler. She could make it without thinking. She could eat it without effort. And the warm broth at the end, spooned slowly from the bottom of the bowl, was the only part of the evening that felt like anything at all. Maruchan and Nissan between them sold more than 4 billion packets of instant ramen in the United States every year. Number 11, pimento cheese on bread. In the South, they called pimento cheese the caviar of the poor. A tub of it cost $3.49 at the grocery store and lasted a week of sandwiches. You spread it on white bread and ate. No heat, no preparation, no skill. The creaminess of the cheese and the sweetness of the pimentos made it taste richer than it was. Southern grandmothers made their own from scratch with sharp cheddar, mayonnaise, and a jar of diced pimentos, but the store-bought version worked the same for someone eating alone with no reason to fuss. Augusta, Georgia hosted a pimento cheese festival every spring. Funeral homes across the Carolinas served pimento cheese sandwiches at every reception. The spread was woven into the fabric of Southern life from birth to death. The recipe first appeared in Good Housekeeping in 1908, and it spread through the South the way most recipes did in that era, hand to hand, neighbor to neighbor, through church cookbooks and family reunions. By the 1940s, nearly every household below the Mason-Dixon line had their own version. Number 10. Cornbread crumbled in buttermilk. This was the meal that confused outsiders and comforted insiders. You took a piece of leftover cornbread, crumbled it into a glass of cold buttermilk, and ate it with a spoon. That was it. No cooking, no heating, no plates. In rural Arkansas, Tennessee, and Kentucky, this was supper on a hot summer night when the kitchen was too warm to use the stove. A box of cornmeal cost $1.49. A quart of buttermilk cost $1.99. Together, they made enough cornbread and buttermilk suppers for a week. Appalachian families had been eating this since before the Civil War. It was not a recipe anyone wrote down because everyone already knew it. Like breathing, like walking. A retired coal miner in Harlan County, Kentucky named Vernon Sizemore ate cornbread and buttermilk every evening of his retirement. He said it tasted exactly the way his mother's kitchen smelled in 1952. The tradition crossed racial lines in the rural South in a way that few other foods did. Number 9. Canned soup with saltines. A can of chicken noodle soup, a sleeve of saltines, a bowl. This was the meal that said, "I do not have the energy to make dinner tonight." Campbell's sold more than 2 billion cans of soup in the United States every year, and a significant portion of those cans were opened by seniors eating alone. The soup was already cooked. You just heated it. The saltines gave it body and made the thin broth feel more substantial. Hospitals served this to patients. Schools served it to children. Senior centers served it to anyone who walked through the door. For a person living alone, opening a can of soup was sometimes the most significant act of self-care in an entire day. It meant you had decided to eat. It meant you had not given up. The can opener was the most important tool in a senior's kitchen. Not the stove, not the oven, not the stand mixer collecting dust on the counter. The can opener. Number 8. Rice and butter with soy sauce. A bag of white rice cost $2.99 and lasted a single person a month. You cooked a cup of rice, dropped a pat of butter on top, and poured a splash of soy sauce over the whole thing. 3 ingredients. 5 minutes if you used instant rice. The butter melted into the grains, and the soy sauce gave it salt and depth and that faint umami that made you want another bite. Japanese-American families in California ate this as a side dish, but for a senior on a fixed income, it was the main course. A retired janitor in Sacramento named Frank Tanaka ate rice and butter with soy sauce for dinner most weeknights through the 1990s. He told his grandson it was the same meal his mother made during the internment at Tule Lake in 1943, when butter and soy sauce were the only seasonings the camp kitchen had. The recipe carried forward not because it was good, but because it meant something. Number 7. Grilled cheese sandwich. 2 slices of bread, a slice of American cheese, a pat of butter in a skillet. 3 minutes per side. The cheese melted and stretched, and the bread turned golden, and the whole kitchen smelled like childhood for the cost of about 50 cents. Diners in every American town had a grilled cheese on the menu for decades. The price climbed from 25 cents in 1960 to $6.99 at a Brooklyn restaurant in 2024, but the version a senior made at home still cost almost nothing. Margaret Hensley, a retired telephone operator in Louisville, Kentucky, made a grilled cheese every Sunday evening for 22 years after she stopped going to church. She said Sunday evenings were the loneliest part of the week, and the grilled cheese was the closest thing to company. The National Dairy Council ran advertisements in the 1950s encouraging mothers to make grilled cheese for their children after school. The campaign worked. Number 6. Cereal for dinner. Nobody talks about this, but millions of seniors eat cereal for dinner. A box of store-brand cornflakes cost $2.49 and lasted 2 weeks. A gallon of milk cost $3.59. You poured a bowl, added milk, and sat down. 1 minute. No cooking, no heat, no cleanup beyond a bowl and a spoon. The dairy industry spent decades convincing Americans that cereal was breakfast food, but in homes where energy was low and appetite was lower, cereal was whatever meal you needed it to be. A social worker in Phoenix, Arizona reported in 2021 that more than half the seniors she visited kept cereal as their primary evening meal. Not because they loved it, because it was the only thing between eating and not eating. The Kellogg's company sold $14.2 billion worth of cereal worldwide in 2023. Their marketing targeted children and families. Their customers included millions of elderly Americans who ate cornflakes alone at kitchen tables at 6 in the evening because the effort required to make anything else exceeded the energy they had left in the day. Number 5. Banana and peanut butter on crackers. A banana, a jar of peanut butter, a sleeve of crackers. You spread peanut butter on a cracker, pressed a slice of banana into it, and ate. No cooking, no standing. You could make this sitting in a recliner with a plate balanced on your lap. A banana cost about 25 cents. The peanut butter and crackers stretched for days. The combination gave you protein, potassium, carbohydrates, and enough substance to call it a meal. Veterans' homes across the country served this as an afternoon snack, but the residents knew it was more than that. For a senior with mobility issues, the recliner was the safest place to eat. The kitchen was too far, the chairs were too hard, and the walk back was too long. This meal met them where they already were. Occupational therapists who worked with elderly patients in home settings reported that recliner eating was far more common than most families realized. Number 4. Canned salmon on toast. A can of pink salmon cost $2.79 in 2024. You opened it, mashed it with a fork, spread it on toast, and ate. The soft bones inside the can were edible and packed with calcium, something doctors specifically recommended for seniors concerned about bone density. This was the meal that fishing communities along the Pacific Northwest coast ate without thinking. Cannery workers in Astoria, Oregon, brought home dented cans that could not be sold and fed their families on salmon toast for decades. A retired cannery worker named Helen Yamaguchi ate salmon on toast every afternoon until she was 96 years old. She said the fish tasted the same in 2019 as it did in 1961. For a senior whose world was shrinking, that consistency was a kind of anchor. The Pacific salmon canning industry shipped more than 6 million cases per year during its peak in the 1930s and 1940s. The canneries were loud, cold, brutal places to work. Women stood shoulder to shoulder for 10-hour shifts, trimming and packing fish by hand. Number 3. Bean and cheese burrito. 1 flour tortilla, a scoop of canned refried beans, a handful of shredded cheese. Spread the beans on the tortilla, sprinkle the cheese, roll it up, and microwave it for 45 seconds. Done. A can of refried beans cost $1.09. A package of tortillas cost $2.49. Together with cheese, the whole setup lasted a week of dinners for under $8. Mexican-American families in El Paso and San Antonio and Los Angeles fed their children on bean burritos for generations, and those children, now seniors themselves, still made the same meal in the same way. It was not a placeholder. It was the taste of a kitchen that no longer existed, of hands that no longer cooked, of a voice that used to call you to the table. The bean burrito is one of the most efficient delivery systems for protein and fiber in the American diet. 1 bean and cheese burrito contained approximately 15 grams of protein, 8 grams of fiber, and enough carbohydrates to sustain a person for hours. Number 2. Bread and gravy. This was poverty distilled into a single plate. You made gravy from bacon drippings or butter, a tablespoon of flour, and a cup of milk, stirred it over heat for 3 minutes until it thickened, and poured it over a slice of bread. In the Depression, this was sometimes the only meal of the day. Families in the Ozarks and across the Great Plains called it poor man's gravy, or sawmill gravy, or milk gravy, but the recipe was the same everywhere. The fat gave it richness, the flour gave it body, the milk made it stretch, and the bread soaked it up like a sponge. A retired farmer in Joplin, Missouri named Earl Tate made bread and gravy every night of the last decade of his life. His children offered to buy him groceries. He said he did not need them. He said the gravy tasted the way the farmhouse smelled when his father came in from the fields. He said that was worth more than steak. The recipe for milk gravy has not changed in 200 years. Number 1. Hot dog sliced in beans. A can of pork and beans cost $1.19. A package of hot dogs cost $2.49 and lasted a week. You sliced 2 hot dogs into the beans, heated the whole thing in a pot or a microwave for 3 minutes, and ate it straight from the bowl. This was the meal that Clara Canucciari's family made during the Depression, the same combination that appeared in cookbooks with no name, the same dinner that millions of Americans grew up eating without ever realizing it was a poor man's meal. The hot dogs gave it protein and salt. The beans gave it fiber and bulk. Together, they made a meal that stuck with you, literally and emotionally. Souse is a dish that actually shows you just how much resourcefulness the working class had back then. The nose-to-tail mentality of people was really something that persisted throughout several centuries before coming to a close leading up to the 2000s. This is a dish that was incredibly averse to being typical. It was one of those things that was different not because it wanted to be, or because it was trying to be, but because it just really had to be. The cooked meat was something that was chopped, mixed with different kinds of vinegar and spices, and suspended in a natural gelatin as it cooled down. Served cold, thick, and in delicate little slices, it had a punch that really helped to balance out the flavors of the pork, with a texture that will keep you stimulated throughout the whole meal. This is a dish that shows you all the different flavors the American South really has to offer. Mulligan stew is a dish that's often associated with lower-class cooking, and it was even something that homeless people relied on to get by the week. It can be best described as a makeshift meal, though if I were being fully real with you, it was just the best you could make out of whatever scraps you had. What I couldn't tell you is how nice this actually ended up being, and the invention of the slow cooker meant that it took a lot less time to make. You could make it with potatoes, vegetables, or even dumplings, and it has evolved from a meal that you'd usually associate with horrible times and poverty to a staple of home-cooked one-pot meals. Working and middle-class families often resort to this when they want to take care of everyone's appetite in one go, and man, it really works. Shrimp wiggle was one of those mid-century wonders that sounded playful but tasted like pure indulgence. Canned shrimp were folded into a quick cream sauce made with milk, butter, and flour, then brightened with a handful of green peas. It was served bubbling hot over saltine crackers or toast, ready in 10 minutes and perfect for company. The joy of cooking presented it as a pantry meal, proof that elegance could live in a can. The name alone made people smile, a hint that mealtime could still be fun even when rushed. The sauce shimmered pale pink, the shrimp tender and mild. It was a dish that combined thrift with theater, turning modest ingredients into something you would never call ordinary. The moment you broke through the creamy layer with your fork, steam carried the scent of butter and the sea. It was quick cooking at its finest, cheerful, comforting, and quietly clever. Mutton fat bread is something that's unapologetically itself. It's too rich, too deep, and it has all the meaty flavors you could ask for. The essence of rendered sheep fat is unmistakable here. It's something that goes perfectly well with day-old bread, slightly dry, a bit hard, and coarse. You know, the entire 9 yards. This is as rustic of a dish as it gets. It absorbs the hot fat in this dish and it crisps on the outside while getting extremely soft on the inside. This dish is something that you would see really commonly whenever you would pass by factory towns or farms, especially among rural laborers, such as people in the 19th and 20th centuries. They were sheep farming regions like the Appalachia, Wales, or the Highlands, and mutton fat was an extremely common ingredient in these areas. That's because it was always far more cheaper than butter, or just a lot more flavorful than lard. The ideal material for frying. The fried bread was also a good way for people to stretch meals, and although some people didn't vibe with the overly gamey taste, back then it was considered a standard of most red meat-based meals. In Spain, ropa vieja is a nostalgic dish, though it doesn't have the same long-standing popularity in America. If you go to Spanish communities here, you'll definitely find a similar sentiment in people's hearts, but you'll also find some of the most eye-popping plates of food you'll ever see. Don't even get me started on the tastes, because this takes the basics of Cajun cooking and makes it as explosive as we know Spanish cooking to be in terms of flavor. Cuban immigrants are again who we can thank for introducing this to us in the first place, since they were the ones that made Spanish cuisine pop off in Florida and its cooking scene. It's a comfort food of the decade, definitely. And the most popular one for ropa vieja was arguably the 1970s. That's because it was never again as accessible as it was back then when people got the slow cooker. They were excited to try out all these dishes that previously they just didn't have access to. It's kind of like when you get a new car and you just can't wait to take it for a test run. Cuban American households were already using this dish heavily, but ropa vieja meant that now, the broader Caucasian audience could finally bask in a masterclass of flavors, spices, and seasonings too. after so long. Egg nests were breakfast theater in 10 minutes flat. Egg whites were whipped into glossy clouds, shaped into little nests, and baked just long enough to firm before the yolks were added back in. The result was a dish that looked far fancier than it was, light, airy, and golden at the center. The Joy of Cooking described it as a dainty breakfast, perfect for brunches or special mornings. Housewives loved it because it turned a single egg into something spectacular. The contrast between the soft yolk and crisp-edged white made every bite feel delicate. Served with buttered toast or a slice of ham, it looked like something straight from a hotel breakfast tray. Children watched in awe as the nests puffed up in the oven. It was fast, pretty, and impossibly charming, the kind of forgotten magic that made morning feel like an occasion. Enough of all this savory stuff. Let's go towards something that's actually sweet. Believe it or not, people had incredible tricks and tips for that. One of those was a rice and molasses bowl, which is the kind of dish that just inspires gentle waves of nostalgia in you. It's something that's drizzled with thick, dark molasses. The molasses, which makes for a very bittersweet, smoky bite with sweet undertones, tends to seep into the grains. This actually gives them such a nice autumn-coated color that really just makes you want to set up your best sheet in a park, call a few friends, and enjoy the small things in life. Historically, though, this was nothing that was so romantic. It was a poor man's breakfast and dessert, especially in most parts of the South and the Appalachian regions. It was very common to see among working-class Northeasterns in the 18th century, and it was something that was relied on to stretch ingredients when things were running low. This is because molasses was always really cheap and bought in bulk, and if people weren't growing their rice, they were stocking up on as much as they could. Rice, molasses, and different kinds of bowls are now bygones of different times, but they were really good. I'll forgive you for thinking this is another showcase of how we tried to copy other countries' culinary mojo, because Swiss steak does sound pretty well Swiss. What might raise your eyebrow is that this is actually a purely American dish. It involved braising, which is a kind of slow cooking that tenderizes any cut of meat to the maximum, and this one involved a round steak in a tomato-based sauce with bell peppers. It was a pretty big classic in the 30s and 40s. Whenever people could afford to get some cuts of meat, they were usually cheap, and as a result, they were more than likely to be tough ones. A dish like this that could take even rubber disguised as beef and turn it into a buttery, smooth steak was a godsend in those times. The fact that it didn't need a lot of work on the side to make it shine also meant that it was something the populace could really jibe with, and slow cooker meant that you could braise away without worry. It wasn't one of the most popular steaks ever, and of course, if you were working with recipes that were centered around making better cuts of meat shine, you'd probably get a more decent steak experience, but it was a homely meal to have after a tough shift or a day spent taking care of the kids. Can anyone ask for more relief? Especially when cooking, it became a non-issue later on. Creamed mushrooms on crackers was the kind of dish that came together faster than guests could arrive, the perfect mix of grace and resourcefulness. A few spoonfuls of butter melted in a pan, a dusting of flour turned it thick, and milk smoothed it into something velvety. Sliced mushrooms followed, softening as they released their earthy aroma. The sauce simmered just long enough to turn glossy before being spooned over crisp crackers or buttered toast. In the 1940s and 1950s, this was elegant entertaining, simple ingredients dressed in charm. The Joy of Cooking called it a supper in miniature, perfect for evenings when friends dropped by unannounced. Housewives loved it because it looked refined yet cost little, using what was already in the pantry. The flavor balanced richness and simplicity, each bite creamy with a hint of woodland flavor. Served with martinis or lemonade, it fit every occasion. Creamed mushrooms on crackers reminded cooks that true hospitality was never about extravagance. It was about warmth, speed, and heart. Stewed dried apples are something that smell like an old kitchen in the middle of fall. I'm talking about warm colors, scents, spices, and fruity notes galore. The apples are leathery slices, but you can also cut them up into the shape of rings for some extra visual flair. They get simmered really slowly in water, and when they plump back to life, they start to go really tender. These are super chewy at their core, and sugar, cinnamon, or just a little bit of clove will give them that extra weight they're missing. Stewed dried apples have been a pantry essential across many centuries, but particularly the 19th century in Southern America. That's because drying apples was the most standard way of keeping them all right before refrigeration came along. Pork and sauerkraut are things that come right out of German-American communities. Put this in a pot and leave it to cook, and let the fragrance carry you right to the streets of Munich and Prague, where New Year's celebrations meant that everyone had an incredible amount of pork and sauerkraut available all the time. It's definitely a historical middle-class dish associated with the late 1900s, and the slow cooking meant that even really tough cuts of pork could become tender, soft, melt-in-your-mouth slices of pork that got anyone's appetite going. When people were exploring foods from other countries, Pennsylvania in particular took a big interest in German food. Maybe because it had its fair share of German-American communities, or maybe because it was just that good. But either way, if you wanted to take an express tour into what German eating felt like, you would go on over to the Midwest or Pennsylvania to try this. Corn fritters with maple drizzle were pure Southern comfort, a 10-minute bridge between hunger and happiness. Corn, fresh or canned, was folded into a light batter of flour, egg, and milk, then dropped into a hot cast-iron skillet where it sizzled and rose into golden pillows. The outside crisped, the inside stayed soft, catching the faint sweetness of the corn. When drizzled with maple syrup, it became something transcendent. Sweet, savory, and nostalgic all at once. The Joy of Cooking called them a luncheon for all hours, and they lived up to that promise. They appeared at kitchen tables, church picnics, and roadside stands, eaten hot from paper towels while steam still curled into the air. Some cooks added green onion or bacon, others kept them plain, letting simplicity shine. Corn fritters with maple drizzle captured the rhythm of everyday cooking, fast, generous, and full of soul. They were food made to be shared, to be gone too soon. Rolled oats and bacon are a really humble and delicious combination. It does two things very perfectly. It balances the comfort of a cream-heavy dish with the allure of smoky flavors. Now, that's not very hard to do, but I think when a dish makes that work, it's always one for the Notes app. The oats are something you simmer slowly in water and milk. You know, the usual preparation. You have to wait until it becomes completely porridge, though. Stir in these crisp crumbles of bacon, and suddenly the dish transforms into a wonderful savory fantasy. You get to have this decadent texture with just the tiniest bits of smoky aftertaste, and it makes for a dish that just feels like the perfect autumn or winter breakfast. Historically, though, this is a dish that you would actually find more often in the summer times, when people were really trying to stretch out their meals and scraping for protein. Especially in the early 20th century, when rationing meant that almost everyone had to think conservatively about what they were eating and how much of it they were using. The savory oats bowl couldn't ever go mainstream, but I think that suits the quiet nature of the dish. Apricot chicken probably came from the Middle East, and to be honest, you'll see a lot of dishes that are going to be from other cuisines and cultures. It's because around the same time the slow cooker was born, there was this desire that enveloped the masses, which steered them away from the sausages, bacon breakfasts, and hash browns that America already offered. They wanted to see what was there in other countries, what their streets smelled like, and what kind of food you could find there. Apricot chicken stew is a good example of the kind of flavors you can expect out of a Middle Eastern joint, with tangy and savory focuses being the star of the show. The one-pot method really helps break down the apricot and provide that tanginess, along with a rich sweetness that brings all of it together. It's an incredible way to have your chicken, and if you're on a bulk diet, this is way tastier than grilled fillets over rice. Mock crab salad was a dish that smiled through hard times, a clever illusion born from creativity. The Joy of Cooking included it as a quick fish substitute, though no crab ever swam near it. Chopped eggs, celery, and a bit of onion were folded into mayonnaise seasoned with paprika and vinegar. The flavor, surprisingly, came close, fresh, tangy, and satisfying on crackers or bread. It was a dish made by those who knew how to stretch the truth and a dollar at the same time. Served chilled in lettuce cups or on toast, it was both playful and practical. Housewives praised it for taste and speed. Children loved it because they believed the name. It was the taste of make-do magic, proving once again that imitation could be its own kind of art. Beef kidney stew is a rich, earthy dish that has a lot to bring to the table. Bold, distinctly old-fashioned flavors and more protein than your muscles probably know what to do with. It gives a really deep umami base. It has a little bit of a mineral flavor, slightly metallic. You know, that's par for the course when you're dealing with actual meat. But you throw this into a skillet with some slow-cooked onions, garlic, red wine, and bay leaves, and you'll end up with this incredibly exotic-looking stew. Dark, glossy, and full of flavor, it's something that has a velvety texture also, thanks to being thickened by flour. The chunks of soft, tender carrot and potato in there also give it an incredible contrast that the dish really needs. Now, historically, this has always been a staple of the working class, especially when you go into the 19th and 20th centuries. Today, beef kidney stew is something that's not really relevant outside of the usual TikTok bringing back age-old recipes. Navy bean soup, as the name implies, is one right out of the cookbooks of the military. See, all those soldiers get so awfully tired from traveling to other countries all of the time, they end up needing soups filled with ham and cured pork to put some pep in their step. Navy bean soup was particularly nice for two reasons. It was already cheap, which was kind of the theme of the time with the World Wars. But even after that, the habit of rationing and using cheap ingredients for military ventures didn't really go away. Anything that cuts costs, right? Navy bean soup definitely knew how to save money. And once slow cookers became a thing, it was saving time too. The second reason is that it was pretty easy to make wherever you were, and it was easy to carry around too, in pots or a thermos. This meant that it was the perfect military food. Healthy, easy to make in bulk, and easy to carry around. Don't think it takes a genius to figure out why they abused this recipe to the moon and back. Cottage cheese pancakes were the forgotten fitness favorite of the 1970s. High in protein, light in texture, and ready in minutes. Cottage cheese, eggs, and a spoonful of flour made the batter. A hot pan did the rest. They cooked fast, puffing slightly around the edges, golden on both sides. The joy of cooking promoted them as part of a modern health breakfast, long before protein was a buzzword. Their flavor was mild but rich, tangy from the cheese and soft like soufflé inside. Served with fruit, honey, or jam, they felt both wholesome and indulgent. They became a favorite of busy parents and early risers who wanted real food without the fuss. Each pancake was proof that nourishment could be effortless. The smell of them frying, warm, milky, slightly sweet, could make any morning softer. Today, few remember how simple they were to make, but once, they were the breakfast that promised a better day. Bacon fat griddle cakes are something that are pretty much just pure, smoky nostalgia. They're the right kind of greasy. They're visually stunning, and they're full of so much flavor that you'll wonder why people stopped making these in the first place. The best part? They're so good to make on a budget. All that's required for this recipe is some flour, milk, eggs, and just a tad bit of cornmeal, sugar, and maybe molasses if you're really feeling like a dessert king. You're going to have got really old school with the griddle. You take leftover bacon grease instead of any butter or oil, and once your cake's shape is completely done, you just slap them on the griddle. What you get for all your hard, strenuous work is a very crispy-edged, savory and sweet pancake that has a lot of smokiness to it. Each bite feels like a crunch, but the exterior is what's really worth talking about. Obviously, you'd expect something like this to have a fluffy inside, but the exterior is just the perfect start to a delicious bite. Cabbage rolls are right out of Eastern Europe. They're the perfect thing to have at a salad bar or a low-key party where you're not trying to rack up the calories. A lot of food that's meant to be for events bloats you badly and leaves you feeling sluggish and lazy throughout the day. It's good to have dishes like these to help balance things out. Cabbage rolls are made out of ground meat and rice, which is then seasoned in cabbage leaves, which by themselves have a really nice crunch. This dish is something we can thank immigrants for, specifically Polish ones. They brought it back with them when they first came over to America, And when the citizens noticed how budget and gut health friendly the dish was, they couldn't resist adopting it for themselves. Then again, so much of American culture is imported from other places after all. One pot culture is something we can somewhat say is our own, and it really shined with cabbage rolls because it meant that the cabbage could soften but not run a risk of burning. Price-wise, this was down to about $2–3 for a family-sized batch, which is a pretty good bargain. Sardine toasts were a pantry miracle that turned the humblest can into something truly satisfying. The Joy of Cooking listed them among the quick meal ideas for when the cupboard looked bare, but dinner still needed dignity. Sardines were mashed with butter, lemon juice, and a little mustard until smooth, then spread generously over crisp toast or crackers. The flavor was bold and briny, the kind that lingered long after the last bite. In the 1940s and 1950s, this was considered smart cooking, high protein, low cost, and full of character. The scent filled the kitchen instantly, sea and spice together, reminding people that frugality could still taste like indulgence. Sometimes a sprinkle of paprika or parsley was added for color, but nothing fancy was needed. Each toast was a small victory of thrift and taste, a quick meal that felt worldly even when made from a single can. Salted herring with potatoes is a dish that is built entirely on contrast. The briny meets the bland, and strong undertones meet soft aftertastes. The herring itself is something that's preserved in brine, right? So it's deeply flavored. It's firm when it comes to the flesh, it's slightly oily, and that tang isn't for everyone. But an honest-to-God seafood lover is going to enjoy the life out of it. The dish itself is something that's most commonly served cold, slightly warmed, or just with a side of elegant mashed potatoes. As elegant as they can be when they're made by a frustrated mom who just wants to get the table set up, really. A bit of chopped onion, sour cream, and dill, and you'll be remembering your mom's cooking soon enough. You know, salted herring with potatoes has always been something that's deeply considered a working-class regular, especially in the American Midwest and Northeast. It was so common to see this in coastal communities where fresh fish were always abundant. Preservation was something even kids could tell you about. Salted herring let families eat protein year-round, and potatoes were cheap and easy to grow, and they could be made into 1,000 different things. One-pan sausage pasta is a name you would never have heard just a few decades before. But now it brings together the best of Italian comfort cooking and American convenience culture to make one incredibly satisfying dish. We've all been there, right? Days where pasta could cure us, but the effort seems way too much for the amount of gas we have left in the tank. That's when recipes like these come in handy. All of the pasta and meat cook together, so the noodles don't ever feel disproportionately flavored. Every strand of noodle is infused with the taste of the sausage. The slow cooking really helps break down the fats, and what you get is something that tastes way more dense flavor-wise than anything else. Baked apples with cinnamon sugar were the heartwarming dessert that proved simplicity never went out of style, a 10-minute wonder that felt like hours of care. Core the apples, fill the hollow with brown sugar, cinnamon, and a pat of butter, then bake until the skin turned glossy and the filling bubbled over like molten caramel. The scent filled every corner of the house, sweet, spiced, and soft, like the comfort of wool blankets and laughter at the table. The apples collapsed slightly, their texture turning tender but not mushy, the syrup pooling at the bottom of the dish. The Joy of Cooking listed it among quick sweets, meant for nights when time was short, but the craving for kindness lingered. Served warm with cream, whipped topping, or ice cream, it felt indulgent without excess. Each bite carried the warmth of memory, the flavor of home, and the calm of something perfectly ordinary done perfectly well. Beef drippings on toast are the quintessential middle-aged dad breakfast, and I'm referring to a really specific kind of dad too. Beer belly, loaded forearms built over a career of a fair day's work for a fair day's pay, and the ability to fall asleep on a floor in jeans and eat literally anything. We all know the type. Beef drippings on toast were a breakfast that people largely made when they were low on materials for anything else. Toast is nice, but people have been hearing about it for literally centuries and, things just get old. People like to spice their toast up. It's only human. It's pretty much just what you would expect, too. Beef drippings are largely a byproduct of bacon and red meat cooking, and people like to scoop that up and preserve it as much as they could. You could pour it over beans, or just about anything, really. It was the kind of thing that would last you through several uncomfortable situations. You know, having to eat the same bland toast sounds pretty uncomfortable to me. It was also not as meaty or greasy as you would expect. It pretty much just tasted like your regular old beef. And this is what helped it to stay a consistent breakfast option throughout a lot of the 1950s and 1960s. Eggs a la goldenrod was one of those quietly elegant dishes that proved how far a single egg could go. Hard-boiled eggs were chopped into a creamy white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk, seasoned just enough to feel comforting without being heavy. The golden yolks were pressed through a sieve and sprinkled on top like sunshine. It was ladled generously over buttered toast, warm and simple, but it felt refined enough to serve guests. Housewives swore by it for its thrift and speed, 10 minutes from pan to plate. The recipe appeared in early editions of The Joy of Cooking as a way to turn breakfast into something special without fuss or waste. It was food for busy mornings, for children before school, or for quiet dinners when money was tight. Even with such basic ingredients, it had an air of ceremony, a touch of care. The smell of warm milk and butter filled the kitchen like a soft promise. It was a reminder that nourishment could be beautiful when made with love and patience. Cold potato with an onion salad was basically the chic way to go vegetarian back then. The dish had a subtle charm that heavily relied on the texture and seasoning. It was also ideally served chilled, because, well, science. I'm just kidding, but basically, the starch starts to firm up. This gives the potato a much more dense and sometimes waxy bite that contrasts really well with the creamy dressings. It also works spectacularly with the flavors present in an onion salad, which honestly adds the perfect crunchy element. Cold potatoes can feel like a mush fest after a few bites, so having some alternative textures in there really helps smoothen everything along. Historically, cold potato and onion salad is something we likely derived from 18th century Europe. This is a pretty traditional recipe in German and French circles, and leftover boiled potatoes were always dressed in oil, vinegar, and herbs so that waste could be avoided. American potato salads are something that evolved from these traditions, and they gained a lot of popularity by the time of the 20th century as a potluck, picnic, and community dinner staple. Tomato rarebit was comfort poured over toast. Imagine a smooth, cheese-rich sauce flavored with tomato, butter, and a pinch of mustard. Simple, warm, and filling. It was a cousin to Welsh rarebit, but humbler, faster, and easier to love. The Joy of Cooking tucked it among its light suppers, promising a full meal made in minutes. It was cooked in one pan, whisked until glossy, then ladled over slices of buttered bread or crackers. The result was creamy and tangy, with a sharpness that cut through the richness of cheese. It fit perfectly into the rhythms of everyday life, something to make after work or to stretch what was left in the icebox. Even when times were tight, this dish brought a touch of luxury to the table. The smell of tomato and melted cheese was like comfort distilled. Every bite carried the warmth of an era when simplicity was both necessity and art. Ham and red-eye gravy is something that's considered a Southern classic. It has a really bold, salty personality, and it's a very no-nonsense flavor profile as well. This is a dish that takes country ham, which is typically dry-cured and goes the pan-frying route. The idea is to fry it until you see those dark brown edges crisping up in the pan. After that, you get an incredible flavor explosion in the form of concentrated pork drippings, and these then take a further unexpected turn. You start to pour in strong black coffee. Now I know you're about to fast forward 10 seconds, but hear me out, okay? The result isn't creamy or thick like you would expect. The coffee ends up deglazing the pan, and it creates this super thin reddish-brown gravy that has an unmistakable sheen to it. The result is a punchy, smoky, and bitter-tasting gravy, but not overwhelmingly bitter, and the coffee cuts through a lot of the richness of the ham fat. This is something you would see so commonly among rail workers in Tennessee and Alabama, especially if it was in the afternoon hours. The caffeine really helped with the job. Here is my challenge. Make one of these this week. Pick the fried egg sandwich or the beans on toast or the bread and gravy. Then sit down at the table. Not the couch, not the recliner, not standing at the counter. Sit down, set a place, use a real plate. Because these meals were never just about being poor. They were about refusing to let poverty take your dignity along with your money. The retired postal worker in Tulsa still opens that same cabinet every morning. The widow in Cleveland still drops an egg into her ramen every night. The carpenter's daughter in Paducah still thinks about her father's peanut butter sandwiches every time she peels a banana. These meals carry weight that has nothing to do with nutrition and everything to do with the quiet stubbornness of people who refuse to stop feeding themselves. 25 meals, all of them under $1, all of them under 5 minutes. All of them proof that feeding yourself, even when the meal is simple and the kitchen is quiet and the table is set for one, is still an act of defiance. Now, none of this is medical advice. If you have dietary concerns, talk to your doctor. But tell me in the comments which one you grew up eating.